Welcome to the Fluent Storybook. This is not just another video. This is a gentle journey back to yourself. You've been carrying stories that don't belong to you. Stories of failure, stories of not being enough, stories that tell you rest is weakness and stillness is wasted time. Your mind has become a library of borrowed fears, inherited worries, and chapters you never chose to write. But today, we're going to close those heavy books and open new ones. Today, we're going to tell you 12 sacred stories. Stories that will not just calm your restless mind, but remind you who you truly are beneath all the noise. These stories are written with simple, beautiful English, so your heart can heal while your language skills grow stronger. Each story carries ancient wisdom wrapped in modern understanding, designed to return you to the peace you've been searching for. If you're watching this feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, or lost in the endless scroll of modern life, I want you to know this. You haven't lost your way. You've just forgotten how to listen to the quiet voice inside that knows exactly where peace lives. These stories will help you remember. Let's begin this sacred journey together. Story 1. The Garden That Forgot How to Grow. There once lived a gardener who had the most beautiful garden in the entire village. Roses bloomed like morning sunlight, vegetables grew strong and healthy, and fruit trees gave sweet gifts every season. People would walk from far places just to see the magic he had created, but slowly something began to change. The gardener started reading books about other gardens. He spent hours looking at pictures of perfect flowers online. He joined groups where gardeners complained about weather, pests, and poor soil. He began comparing his roses to magazine covers and his vegetables to social media posts. Soon, the gardener stopped looking at his own garden with love. Instead, he saw only problems. My roses aren't red enough. My tomatoes aren't big enough. My grass isn't green enough. Other gardens are better. He became so busy judging his garden that he forgot to water it, forgot to tend it, forgot to appreciate it. The garden began to wither, not because it was bad, but because it was no longer receiving love and attention. The flowers hung their heads, the vegetables stopped growing, and the fruit trees became sad. One morning, a small child wandered into the garden. She had never seen other gardens, never read magazines, never compared anything to anything else. She looked around with wonder and said, "This is the most beautiful place I've ever seen. Look how the morning light kisses these flower petals. Feel how soft this grass is under our feet. Smell how sweet the air is here." The gardener stopped and looked through the child's eyes. For the first time in months, he really saw his garden. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. It wasn't flawless, but it was his. It wasn't like other gardens, but it was beautiful in its own unique way. From that day forward, the gardener made a promise. Every morning, before looking at anything else, he would walk through his garden with grateful eyes. He would touch the soil, smell the flowers, and say thank you to this small piece of earth that was growing under his care. The garden began to bloom again. Not because it changed, but because it was finally being seen with love instead of judgment. The sacred truth. Your life is like that garden. When you stop comparing it to others and start appreciating it for what it is, it begins to flourish again. The problem was never your life. The problem was the eyes you were using to look at it. Story 2. The Monk and the Angry River. High in the mountains, there lived an old monk who had found perfect peace. His mind was still like a quiet lake, and his heart was light like morning air. People came from everywhere to learn his secret. One day, a young man climbed the mountain, feeling angry and frustrated with everything in his life. "Master," he said, "I am always upset. People annoy me, situations stress me, and I cannot find peace anywhere. How do you stay so calm?" The monk smiled and said, "Come with me to the river." They walked to a place where the mountain river was rushing very fast, crashing against rocks, making loud, angry sounds. The water was muddy and wild. "Tell me," said the monk, "is this river angry?" "Of course," said the young man. "Look how it fights with the rocks, how it makes so much noise, how muddy and chaotic it is." The monk nodded and led him upstream to another part of the same river. Here, the water was flowing gently through a meadow. It was clear, quiet, and peaceful. Fish swam lazily in the calm water, and flowers grew along the soft banks. "Now tell me," said the monk, "is this river peaceful?" "Yes," said the young man, confused. "But it's the same river. How can it be both angry and peaceful?" "Exactly," smiled the monk. "The river is not angry or peaceful. The river is just water moving down the mountain. What makes it seem angry or peaceful is what it meets along the way. When it meets rocks and narrow spaces, it appears to fight. When it meets open meadows and soft earth, it flows calmly." The young man was quiet for a long moment. "You mean your mind is like this river," said the monk gently. "It's not naturally angry or peaceful, but when your thoughts meet rocks, difficult people, stressful situations, unfair circumstances, they seem to fight and become muddy. When your thoughts meet open spaces, acceptance, understanding, letting go, they flow peacefully. But how do I choose which path my mind takes?" asked the young man. "You cannot always choose what rocks life puts in your path," said the monk. "But you can choose how to flow around them. Water never fights rocks by being harder. It wins by being softer, more flexible, more patient. It finds a way around, or it waits until time softens the rock." The young man understood. He had been trying to be harder than his problems, louder than his frustrations, stronger than his pain. But maybe the secret was to be like water, soft, flexible, and always finding a way forward without fighting. The sacred truth: you are not broken when you feel upset. You are just water meeting rocks. Instead of fighting harder, try flowing softer. Patience and flexibility will carry you around any obstacle that life puts in your way. Story 3. The library of whispered worries. In the center of a busy city stood an unusual library. From the outside, it looked like any other building, but inside, instead of books, the shelves were filled with glass bottles. Each bottle contained a whispered worry that someone had left behind. There were bottles labeled, "What if I fail?" and "Am I good enough?" and "What will people think?" and "What if I never find love?" The bottles glowed softly with the energy of fear, and new ones appeared every day as people from the city brought their worries to leave them there. A young woman named Sarah discovered this library during the most anxious time of her life. She was carrying so many worries that she could barely sleep or eat. The librarian, a gentle old woman with kind eyes, welcomed her inside. "I have so many worries," Sarah said, looking around at the thousands of bottles. "I worry about everything. My job, my relationships, my future, my past. I can't stop thinking about all the things that might go wrong." The librarian nodded with understanding. "Would you like to see something interesting?" She led Sarah to a special room in the back of the library. This room was filled with different bottles, bottles that looked old and dusty. "These," said the librarian, "are worries from people who lived here 100 years ago." Sarah read some of the labels. What if the new telephone technology ruins human connection? What if women getting the right to vote destroys society? What if automobiles make horses extinct and ruin the economy? But, said Sarah, most of these things either didn't happen or when they did happen, people adapted just fine. Exactly, smiled the librarian. Now, let me show you something else. She led Sarah to another room with even older bottles. These are worries from 200 years ago. The labels read, "What if this new thing called democracy creates chaos? What if people learn to read books and stop listening to their elders? What if traveling by ship across oceans is too dangerous?" Sarah began to understand. These people were just as worried as I am, but about things that seem silly now. "One more room," said the librarian. They entered a room filled with the oldest bottles of all. These worries are 500 years old. The labels said things like, "What if the earth is really round and we fall off? What if reading books makes people think too much? What if this printing press makes handwritten scrolls worthless?" Sarah laughed, but not in a mean way. She laughed with recognition. Every generation thinks their worries are the most important, the most real, the most dangerous. "Yes," said the librarian. "And here's the most interesting part. In all my years working here, do you know how many of the worries in these bottles actually came true in the way people feared? How many? Less than 3%. And even when something challenging did happen, people found ways to handle it that they never imagined they could." The librarian led Sarah back to the main room. "Now, would you like to add your worries to our collection? You don't have to carry them with you anymore." Sarah spent the next hour whispering her fears into empty bottles. With each worry she released, she felt lighter. "What if I fail my presentation?" Went into one bottle. "What if I never find the right partner?" Went into another. "What if I'm not smart enough?" Went into a third. When she was finished, the librarian said, "You can visit these worries anytime you want, but you don't have to carry them in your heart anymore. Most of them will never come true, and the few challenges that do come will find you stronger and more resourceful than you imagine." Sarah left the library feeling lighter than she had in years. She realized that worry was just her mind's way of trying to control an uncontrollable future, and that most of her mental energy was being spent on problems that existed only in her imagination. The sacred truth. Your worries feel real and urgent, but most of them are just stories your mind tells about a future that will probably never happen. You can acknowledge your concerns without letting them control your peace. Today's worries will seem as unnecessary as yesterday's once you learn to trust your ability to handle whatever actually comes. Story 4. The Man Who Collected Sunsets There. Was once a man who worked in a tall office building in the heart of a busy city. Every day he arrived before sunrise and left after sunset. His life was filled with meetings, deadlines, emails, and phone calls. He was successful by all the world's measurements, but inside he felt empty and tired. One evening he had to stay very late to finish an important project. As he finally prepared to leave, he noticed something he had never seen before. Through his office window, the sky was painted with the most beautiful colors: deep orange, soft pink, golden yellow, and purple like royal fabric. He stopped everything and just watched. For 5 minutes he did nothing but look at this sunset. No phone, no computer, no thinking about tomorrow. Just watching the sky change colors like a slow, beautiful dance. That night, he slept better than he had in months. The next evening, he decided to watch the sunset again. And the next evening, and the next. Soon he realized he had been working in this building for 8 years and had never once noticed the sunset. How many beautiful moments had he missed while staring at screens and rushing through life? He started taking pictures of the sunsets, but then realized that looking through a camera was different from looking with his eyes. The camera captured the image, but his eyes captured the feeling. So he stopped taking pictures and just started being present for each sunset. Word spread around the office. Did you know Marcus watches sunsets from the conference room every evening? Some people thought it was strange. Others were curious. A few brave colleagues joined him. Soon, a small group gathered every evening to watch the sunset together. They didn't talk much. They just stood at the window and watched the sky paint itself with new colors every single day. Something magical began to happen. The people who watched sunsets together started feeling calmer during the day. They made fewer mistakes because they weren't always rushing. They treated each other with more kindness because they had shared something beautiful together. They slept better because their minds had experienced peace instead of just productivity. Marcus realized that for years he had been living like a machine that only worked and slept. But humans need beauty. They need moments that remind them that life is more than just tasks and goals. They need to remember that they are part of something larger and more magnificent than their daily problems. One day, a young intern asked Marcus, "Why do you spend time watching sunsets when you could be getting ahead on tomorrow's work?" Marcus thought for a moment and said, "I used to believe that time was money, that every minute should be productive. But now I understand that some moments are not about producing anything. They are about remembering who we are. When I watch a sunset, I remember that I am not just a worker or a problem solver. I am a human being capable of experiencing wonder." The intern looked confused. "But doesn't that make you less efficient?" "Actually," Marcus smiled, "it makes me more human. And when I'm more human, I'm better at everything I do. I make better decisions because my mind is calmer. I solve problems more creatively because I've given my brain time to rest. I work better with people because I remember that we're all part of the same beautiful, temporary experience called life." Years later, Marcus left the corporate world and opened a small cafe with large windows facing west. Every evening, people would come not just for coffee, but to watch the sunset together. Some came alone after difficult days. Others brought friends or family. All of them left feeling a little more peaceful, a little more connected to the wonder of being alive. Above the cafe door, Marcus hung a sign that read, "Some moments are not meant to be productive. They are meant to remind you that you are alive." The sacred truth. In a world obsessed with productivity, your soul needs moments of pure wonder. Beauty is not a luxury. It's medicine for a mind that has forgotten how magnificent life can be. Give yourself permission to pause and witness the daily miracles that surround you. Story 5. The Weightlifter. Who learned to put things down in a small gym on the edge of town. There was a weightlifter named David who was known for his incredible strength. He could lift heavier weights than anyone else, and he was proud of his power. But David had developed a strange habit. He never put the weights down. He would finish his workout, but instead of returning the weights to their racks, he would carry them with him. First, it was just a small weight in each hand as he walked to his car. Then he started carrying weights while he ate lunch. Soon he was carrying weights while he shopped, while he visited friends, while he tried to sleep. "Why don't you put those down?" people would ask. "Because I'm strong enough to carry them," David would reply. "Putting them down would make me weak." At first, David felt powerful. He was the only person who could carry heavy weights all day long. But slowly, carrying the weights everywhere began to change his life. His hands were always occupied, so he couldn't hug his family properly. His arms were always tired, so he couldn't enjoy activities that required gentle movements. His shoulders ached constantly, so he couldn't sleep well. David's friends stopped inviting him places because the weights made everything awkward. Restaurant chairs broke under the extra weight. He couldn't fit through doorways easily. Simple activities became complicated and exhausting. One day, David met an old man sitting peacefully in the park, feeding birds with gentle hands. "You look so relaxed," David said, shifting the heavy weights in his arms. "I wish I could feel that peaceful." "Why don't you sit down and rest?" asked the old man. "I can't," said David. "I'm carrying these weights. I can see that." "Why are you carrying them?" "Because I'm strong enough to. If I put them down, it would mean I'm weak." The old man smiled. "Can you tell me, what is the purpose of lifting weights in the first place?" David thought about it. "To build strength, I suppose." "And once you have built that strength, what is the purpose of continuing to carry the weights everywhere?" David was quiet. He had never thought about this question. The old man continued gently. "True strength is not proven by carrying weight all the time. True strength is knowing when to lift something up and when to put it down. A wise weightlifter uses his strength when it's needed and rests when it's not. But what if people think I'm weak if they see me without the weights?" "Do you think I am weak?" asked the old man. David looked at the peaceful, content man feeding birds with steady, gentle hands. "No, you seem very strong, but in a different way." "I have carried many heavy things in my life," said the old man. "Responsibilities, worries, other people's problems, old anger, past mistakes. I thought that carrying them all the time made me strong and responsible. But actually it just made me tired and unable to enjoy the simple pleasures of life." David began to understand. "So when did you put them down?" "When I realized that strength is not about how much you can carry forever. Strength is about knowing what is worth carrying, when to carry it, and when to set it down so you can live fully." That day, David made a decision. He went back to the gym and placed the weights carefully on their racks. His arms felt strange at first, so light and free. But for the first time in months, he was able to hug his family with both arms. He was able to sleep without pain. He was able to enjoy a meal without the awkwardness of managing heavy objects. David discovered that putting the weights down didn't make him weak. It made him available for love, for rest, for joy, for all the experiences that require free hands and an unburdened body. He still lifted weights at the gym, harder than ever. But now he understood the difference between training his strength and punishing himself with unnecessary burdens. The sacred truth. Strength is not measured by how much you can carry all the time. True strength is knowing what to pick up, when to carry it, and when to put it down. Your mind, like your body, needs rest between the heavy lifting. Give yourself permission to set down the burdens that are no longer serving your growth. Story 6. The Artist Who Painted in the Dark. There lived an artist named Luna who had been painting for 20 years. She had a small studio filled with canvases, brushes, and every color of paint imaginable. But Luna had developed a peculiar habit. She only painted at night in complete darkness. "Why do you paint in the dark?" her friends would ask. "Because I'm not good enough yet," Luna would answer. "When I paint in the light, I see all my mistakes. I see how imperfect my work is compared to the great masters. In the dark, I don't have to see the flaws. For years, Luna created painting after painting in complete darkness. She would feel her way across the canvas, mixing colors by touch, creating shapes and forms without ever seeing what she was making. When morning came, she would quickly cover all her paintings with cloth sheets before any light could reveal them. Luna's studio became filled with hundreds of covered paintings that no one, not even Luna herself, had ever seen. Neighbors would sometimes hear the sound of her brush against canvas late at night and wonder what mysterious art was being created in that dark room. One morning, Luna overslept. She had been painting until very late and forgot to cover her latest work before sunrise. When she woke up, sunlight was streaming through her studio window, illuminating the painting she had created the night before. Luna's first instinct was to cover it quickly, but something made her stop. The painting was beautiful. It wasn't perfect. There were unexpected color combinations, brush strokes that wandered in surprising directions, and forms that were more emotional than technically precise. But it was alive in a way that touched her heart. Curious now, Luna pulled the sheet off another painting. This one, too, had a raw, honest beauty that she had never noticed. The imperfections weren't flaws, they were personality. The unexpected elements weren't mistakes, they were discoveries. Feeling brave, Luna spent the entire day uncovering painting after painting. Her studio was transformed into a gallery of extraordinary work. Each painting was unique, expressive, and full of life. Some were abstract, others more realistic, but all of them carried something that no amount of technical perfection could create: genuine emotion and authentic creativity. Luna realized she had been seeing her work through the wrong eyes. She had been looking for perfection instead of expression, for technical correctness instead of emotional truth. She had been comparing her inner artist to external standards instead of trusting her own creative vision. That afternoon, Luna invited her friends to see her work for the first time. They were amazed. "These are incredible," they said. "Why have you been hiding them?" "I thought they weren't good enough," Luna admitted. "Good enough for what?" asked her friend Maria. "These paintings don't need to be like anyone else's work. They need to be like yours, and they are perfectly, beautifully yours." Luna learned that day that creativity flourishes not in the darkness of fear, but in the light of acceptance. She had spent years hiding from her own gift because she was afraid it wasn't perfect. But perfection was never the goal. Authentic expression was. From that day forward, Luna painted in natural light. She still made what others might call mistakes, but she now saw them as choices. Her brushstrokes became more confident, her colors more bold, because she was no longer painting to avoid judgment. She was painting to share her unique way of seeing the world. Luna's work began to sell, not because it was flawless, but because it was real. People could feel the honesty in every stroke, the courage in every color choice, the freedom in every composition. She kept one painting from her dark period hanging in her studio as a reminder. Below it, she wrote, "I spent years afraid to see my own work. Now I understand that the light doesn't reveal flaws. It reveals beauty that was always there. The sacred truth. You have been hiding your gifts in darkness because you're afraid they're not perfect enough. But the world doesn't need another perfect copy. It needs your authentic expression. Step into the light and let your imperfect, beautiful truth be seen." What you think are flaws might be exactly what makes your contribution precious and unique. Story 7. The Fisherman Who Forgot. How to wait on the shore of a peaceful lake lived an old fisherman named Samuel, who had been fishing the same waters for 40 years. He knew every rock beneath the surface, every seasonal pattern of the fish, and every change in weather before it happened. Samuel was known throughout the village as the most patient and wise fisherman anyone had ever met. But the world around Samuel began to change. New technology arrived in the village. People started carrying devices that gave them instant answers to any question, instant connection to any person, instant entertainment for any moment of boredom. Everything became fast, immediate, always available. Samuel watched his neighbors become restless when they had to wait for anything. A slow internet connection, a red traffic light, a line at the store. "Why wait when you can have everything now?" they would say. Slowly, this restlessness began to affect Samuel, too. He started feeling frustrated when the fish didn't bite immediately. He began bringing his phone to the lake to check messages while waiting. He started switching fishing spots every few minutes instead of staying patient in one place. He bought expensive new equipment that promised faster results. The more impatient Samuel became, the fewer fish he caught. But instead of recognizing the pattern, he assumed the problem was that he needed even better, faster methods. He bought electronic fish finders, special lures that guaranteed quick catches, and books about efficiency fishing techniques. One day, Samuel's 8-year-old granddaughter Emma came to fish with him. She had never been fishing before, so Samuel gave her a simple rod with basic bait and told her to cast her line into the water. "Now what?" Emma asked. "Now we wait," Samuel said, already reaching for his phone to check his messages. "Wait for what?" "For the fish to bite." "How long does that take?" "Well, it could be a few minutes, or it could be a few hours, or maybe a few hours," Emma interrupted. "That's so long. What do we do while we wait?" Samuel looked at his granddaughter and realized he had forgotten how to answer that question. What had he used to do during all those peaceful hours on the water before he became obsessed with instant results? Emma sat quietly for a few minutes, then started noticing things. "Grandfather, look how the water moves in tiny waves. And listen to how different birds sound. And see how the light changes the color of the trees reflected in the water." Samuel put away his phone and began to see the lake through Emma's eyes. He had been coming to this place for 40 years, but had stopped really seeing it. He had been so focused on the goal of catching fish that he had forgotten the gift of simply being beside the water. "Grandfather," Emma whispered, "I think my fishing line moved." "Don't pull it yet," Samuel said gently. "Let the fish decide if it wants to come with us." They waited together, watching the line, listening to the water, feeling the peace that comes from not needing anything to happen quickly. When Emma finally caught her first fish, she was more excited about the waiting than the catching. "That was so fun," she said. "I liked watching the water and listening to the sounds and feeling the sun and just being here with you." Samuel realized that in trying to make fishing more efficient, he had removed everything that made fishing meaningful. The waiting wasn't the obstacle to the experience. The waiting was the experience. The patience wasn't the price he paid to catch fish. The patience was the gift the lake was offering him. From that day forward, Samuel left his phone at home when he went fishing. He stopped buying gadgets and techniques that promised faster results. He returned to simple equipment and patient methods. And somehow, he began catching more fish than he had in years. But more importantly, He rediscovered why he had fallen in love with fishing in the first place. It wasn't about the fish. It was about the waiting, the watching, the quiet conversation with water and sky and time itself. Samuel learned that in a world obsessed with speed, the ability to wait peacefully had become a rare and precious skill. Patience was not about suffering through delay. It was about discovering the hidden richness in moments that seemed empty but were actually full. The sacred truth. In rushing toward every destination, you miss the journey that contains the real treasure. Patience is not about waiting for something better to happen. It's about discovering the fullness that already exists in this moment. The peace you're searching for isn't at the end of your goals. It's available right now in the quiet space between wanting and having. Story 8. The Teacher Who Learned to Unlearn Professor. Margaret Williams had been teaching at the university for 35 years. Her office walls were covered with degrees, awards, and certificates. She had written books, given lectures around the world, and was considered an expert in her field. Margaret took great pride in knowing more than anyone else in the room. But over the years, something troubling began to happen. Margaret noticed that she had stopped learning. She would listen to her students' questions, but instead of being curious about their perspectives, she would immediately think about how to correct them with the right answer. She attended conferences, but instead of absorbing new ideas, she would mentally prepare arguments about why the speakers were wrong. Margaret had become so invested in being the person who knew everything that she had closed herself off from discovering anything new. Her mind had become like a cup that was already full. There was no room for anything else to enter. One semester, a new student named David joined her advanced philosophy class. David was older than most students, having returned to university after working as a carpenter for 20 years. While other students tried to impress Margaret with complicated theories, David asked simple, honest questions. "Professor Williams," David said one day, "you explained this concept very clearly, but I'm wondering, what if we're looking at it backwards? What if the question itself is the problem, not the answer?" Margaret's first reaction was to dismiss this idea. David was just a carpenter, not a trained philosopher. But something in his genuine curiosity made her pause. "Tell me more about what you're thinking," she heard herself say. Surprised by her own openness, David shared his perspective, which came not from books but from years of working with his hands, solving practical problems, and observing how things really worked in the world beyond academia. His insights were simple but profound, rooted in experience rather than theory. That night, Margaret found herself thinking about David's questions in a way she hadn't thought about new ideas in years. She realized that she had been so busy defending what she already knew that she had stopped exploring what she didn't know. The next class, Margaret tried something different. Instead of beginning with her prepared lecture, she said, "I want to start today by admitting something. I've been teaching this subject for decades, but yesterday a student asked me a question that made me realize I might have been thinking about it in a limited way. I don't have the answer yet, and I find that exciting rather than threatening." The class was surprised. They were used to professors who presented knowledge as fixed and final, but Margaret's honesty created a different kind of energy in the room. Students began asking more genuine questions, sharing more authentic thoughts, and exploring ideas together rather than just memorizing information. Margaret began each class by saying, "Here's what I thought I knew about today's topic." And here are the questions that are making me reconsider. She started assigning students to find holes in famous theories, including her own published work. She encouraged them to disagree with her, to challenge assumptions, to approach old problems with fresh eyes. The more Margaret admitted she didn't know, the more she began to learn. She discovered new research that contradicted her old beliefs. She found connections between ideas that she had never noticed before. Most surprisingly, she began to enjoy teaching more than she had in 20 years. I spent so long trying to be the smartest person in the room that I forgot intelligence is not about having all the answers, Margaret reflected. Real intelligence is about asking better questions and remaining curious about possibilities I haven't considered yet. One day, David approached her after class. "Professor, I want to thank you for changing the way you teach. When teachers act like they know everything, it makes students feel stupid for being confused. But when you admit you're still learning, it makes us feel like learning is something we can do together." Margaret realized that by pretending to be finished learning, she had been teaching her students that learning was something you completed rather than something you lived. But knowledge was not a destination you arrived at. It was a journey you continued. In her final year before retirement, Margaret wrote a book called The Wisdom of Not Knowing. In it, she wrote, "I spent most of my career trying to fill my mind with answers. Only at the end did I discover that the most intelligent thing I could do was empty it of certainty and refill it with wonder. The sacred truth. True wisdom is not about accumulating knowledge. It's about maintaining the humility to keep learning. The moment you think you have life figured out is the moment you stop growing. Stay curious, stay open, and remember that the most profound discoveries often come from admitting you don't know rather than proving that you do. And so we reach the end of these 8 sacred stories. But this is not really an ending, it is a beginning. A beginning of your return to the peace that has always lived within you, waiting patiently beneath the noise and rush of modern life. If you have listened to these stories with your whole heart, something has shifted inside you. Not because the stories themselves have magical power, but because they have reminded you of truths you already knew but had forgotten. They have whispered to the wise part of your soul that never left, even when your mind was filled with chaos. You came to this video carrying stories that were not yours, stories of not being enough, of time running out, of peace being something you had to earn or achieve or find somewhere outside yourself. But now you remember. Peace is not a destination. Peace is your natural state, temporarily clouded by thoughts and worries that pass through your consciousness like weather through the sky. You are not broken. You never were. You are not behind in some race that everyone else is winning. You are not lazy for needing rest, weak for feeling overwhelmed, or strange for wanting silence in a world that never stops talking. You are a human being having a human experience in a time when the world has forgotten how to be human. But you remember now. You remember that your worth is not measured by your productivity. Your peace is not dependent on perfect circumstances. Your strength is not proven by how much you can carry forever. Your intelligence is not about having all the answers. Your beauty is not defined by others' opinions. Your time is not a resource to be consumed, but a gift to be experienced. Your thoughts are not your master, but your responsibility. Your presence is not a small thing, but the greatest gift you can offer. The Fluent. Storybook is not just a channel, it is a sanctuary. A place where you can return whenever the world becomes too loud, too fast, too demanding. These stories will be here waiting for you. like old friends who understand your heart and speak your language of longing for something deeper than the surface of daily life. Your English will grow stronger not because you memorized rules, but because you felt the rhythm of wisdom in simple, honest words. Your mind will grow calmer not because you followed techniques, but because you remembered who you are beneath all the roles you play. Take these stories with you into your days. When you feel rushed, remember the fisherman who learned to wait. When you feel not good enough, remember the artist who painted in the dark. When you feel overwhelmed by choices, remember the gardener who learned to see his own garden with love. But most importantly, remember this: you are writing your own sacred story every day. With every choice to be kind instead of right, to be present instead of productive, to be gentle instead of harsh with yourself and others, you are creating a story worth telling. The world needs your story. Not the perfect version you think you should create, but the real, imperfect, beautifully human story you are actually living. Your struggles, your healing, your moments of doubt, and your moments of grace. All of it matters. All of it has meaning. All of it is sacred. If this video has touched your heart, if even one story has helped you breathe a little deeper or rest a little easier, then please subscribe to the Fluent Storybook. Not for me, but for you. Because subscribing is your promise to yourself to return to this sanctuary whenever you need to remember who you really are. Share these stories with someone who needs to remember their own worth. The world is full of beautiful, tired souls who have forgotten that peace is their birthright. Your sharing might be the lighthouse that guides them home to themselves. Until we meet again in the next collection of sacred stories, carry this truth with you. You are not a problem to be solved, a machine to be optimized, or a project to be completed. You are a miracle walking around in human form, temporarily forgetting your own magnificence. The world is loud, but your heart knows how to whisper. The world is fast, but your soul knows how to rest. The world is complicated, but love is simple. Your story continues, beautiful soul. Write it with kindness. Write it with courage. Write it with the deep knowing that you are exactly where you need to be, learning exactly what you need to learn, becoming exactly who you are meant to be. Welcome home to yourself. Welcome home to peace. Welcome home to the Fluent Storybook. The screen fades to gentle music as the final words appear. Your most important story is the one you're living right now.